Women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home. For it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church.
Samuel said to Saul, I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites.
Jésus, par ton sang précieux, enlève mon iniquité. Regarde-moi sur les cieux, dis-moi que tu m'as pardonné. J'ai longtemps erré cœur rebelle, mais j'entends ta voix qui m'appelle. Au pied de ta croix maintenant, tout confus, brisé, je me rends. Blanc, blanc, plus blanc que neige, blanc, plus blanc que neige. Lavé dans le sang de l'agneau, je serai plus blanc que la neige.
Now go, attack the Amalekites, and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. 1 Samuel 15.
Greetings, everyone. It is my immense pleasure to welcome you to this 21st episode of God is Not White, our program that we air on Wednesday nights from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., except when there is, major cause for disruption, as there has been in the past 2 weeks when we were in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. And it is my pleasure to resume the weekly programming tonight. My name is Jafri Kaiti, and I greet you from Ottawa, Gatineau, the capital of Canada. And we've been doing this for a number of weeks now, where we examine the relationship that people of African descent has developed, nurtured, and maintained with Judeo-Christianity. So the program God is Not White has covered a number of items or topics in the past few weeks, and we usually do so with a slide presentation, and this evening will be no exception. The slide presentation will take us through part of the discussion, and it is my hope that enough time will be left at the end for you to participate by calling using WhatsApp at the number that you see at the bottom of the screen, 613-482-2549. Last few weeks, when we were discussing the concept of God as we grew up through a Christian family, socialized with the concept through Episcopalian of Haiti, a denomination of Christianity that was established by Africans who escaped racial slavery and oppression in the United States and found refuge in Haiti, which at the time in the early 1800s was the only place in the Americas, uh, an oasis of freedom, so to speak, where Africans in the Americas could find freedom and nationhood. And so we delve into the creation of Judeo Christianity, how it developed under Roman rule, and the characters who were the main players in establishing the dogma, the faith, and the literature of Christianity, namely Paul of Tarsus and Constantine, the Roman emperor who convened the Council of Nicaea. We looked at the councils and we explain why our conclusion is that they invented the Word of God, and we established what the receipts were in terms of when, where, how, and why this was done. So their words, their votes, their book, their Jesus for their purpose. And we established that Judeo Christianity, as it is today and as it has been practiced for centuries, is a dictatorship of old white men in long robes. And we spoke about the happenings in the city of Vatican in Europe. We spoke about the necessity for restitution, reparations, remembrer, particularly for people of African descent who are in this process of trying to recapture back our common sense and our good sense and our minds from the sect, an anti African sect that we were socialized into. We spoke about the various strategies that African people have undertaken. We said superstition ain't the way, Black Jesus ain't the way. And we spoke about all the misery of the world in the context of Europeans and Euro Americans who have taken over lands and resources of the African people that they had dispossessed, now erecting walls so that Africans cannot follow their goods, their resources to Europe or to the United States and Canada. And so now you have ministers in France, ministers in Quebec, Canada, claiming that they cannot welcome all the misery of the world, but they can welcome all of the gold, all of the diamonds, all of the lithium, all of the uranium of the world, right? But not all of the Black people of the world, whom they term the misery, all the misery of the world. Dessalines is all we need. We spoke about the liberator of Haiti and how his approach to religious freedom is something that modern day people of African descent should consider. Um, uh, and we spoke about liberation theology as they were about to elect a new pope. And not so long ago, the pope was a staunch attacker of liberation theology. We're talking about Joseph Ratzinger, who used to really go after the Leonardo Buffs, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, all of these men who tried to make reform from within the church, who were attacked by the hierarchy of the church itself, all the way to the assassination of Archbishop Oscar Romero in El Salvador. We spoke about better options to attain eternal life. We said religion ain't the way. And tonight, we shall present you why fake repentance ain't the way. And so we have very few slides tonight, and I hope you will comment actively and you will join us perhaps by phone by dialing the number at the bottom of the screen when we reach that time. If you're not living in Canada, you may not be familiar with this practice. It is not used in all of the countries that are currently uh, occupied by European invaders who took over native lands. But in Canada, it has been common practice for a number of decades now. It's called land acknowledgement. It takes many forms. And I will now just share how the King of England, who is also the head of state of Canada, expressed the land acknowledgement while he was in Ottawa yesterday. And so let's watch that.
I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. This land acknowledgement is a recognition of shared history as a nation, while continuing to deepen my own understanding. It is my great hope that in each of your communities and collectively as a country, a path is found toward truth and reconciliation in both word and deed. This is my 20th visit to Canada.
So it's interesting that Charles, King of England, mentioned that he's been here for more than 20 times, yet he's still trying to deepen his understanding of what happened. And as you heard this land acknowledgement that he expressed, I can tell you this is commonplace. Now, of course, his was very short, perhaps for good reason. But I present to you here an example that is found on the website of the Canada Council of the Arts, which states, the Canada Council of the Arts acknowledges that our offices located in Ottawa are on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. The Council recognizes the Algonquins as the customary keepers and defenders of the Ottawa River watershed and its tributaries. We honor their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory and uphold and uplift the voice and values of our host nation. Further, the Council respects and affirms the inherent and treaty rights of all Indigenous peoples across this land. The Council has and will continue to honor the commitments to self-determination and sovereignty we have made to Indigenous nations and peoples. The Council acknowledges the historical oppression of lands, cultures, and the original peoples in what we now know as Canada, and fervently believes the arts contribute to the healing and decolonizing journey we all share together. This land acknowledgement was developed by members of the Algonquin community, and we thank them for their generosity and collaboration. You will find this land acknowledgement in many forms, and myself, when I was a civil servant, I found myself many times at meetings where this land acknowledgement was being made, and sometimes um, I cringe when I hear folks use words like we are the settlers and we this, we that. And in fact, I always consider that this we is a very liberal use of the term because it wasn't we. My African ancestors did not plunder anybody's land. We were kidnapped, taken by force to the Americas. And so, what is not clearly expressed in these so called land acknowledgments is that we are dealing with theft of territory and we are dealing with genocide, attempted genocide that is still not clearly acknowledged and that adequate efforts be made to rectify the situation, as we will see in other slides. And so, as I was watching the visit of King Charles on TV um, after having gone to the demonstration in Ottawa, it was sad to notice the lack of critical analysis, whether on the English or the French TV channels. I must also say that those commentators on CBC Radio Canada represent a rather monochromatic aspect of what could have been real analysis of the situation. I do not need to get into detail as to, you know, what spectrum was on the TV screen, as is so often, too often the case on the national television in Canada. We say from Elizabeth I to Charles III, there has been tragically very little change, let alone progress. It is with sadness that I must witness how it has been several years now since I dared dream that change was really arriving in Canada. With the nomination of Michaëlle Jean as Governor General of Canada in 2005, when she adopted as her coat of arms, as you can see here, symbols of freedom, symbols of resistance to colonial oppression, I had taken the liberty of writing to the former journalist, Michaëlle Jean. This article titled British Crown to Pay Long Overdue Reparations is dated April 7th, 2007. And in it, I challenged Michaëlle Jean to not conform to the expectations of her. That is, for her to play pretty and just, you know, confine herself, a role to shaking her hand, waving to the public, and taking pictures. And so I asked the question, will this Canadian Governor General, whose personal coat of arms bears the broken chain of the famed unknown maroon, become the head of state who convinces the British Crown to pay the long overdue reparations to the native peoples of Africa and of the Americas? And of course, I mentioned to Michaëlle Jean, given that her husband is a French intellectual and she was a French citizen, as well to take it upon herself to address the issue of restitution of the Charles X ransom that was collected by the French from the self liberated Africans of Haiti from 1825 to 1947. Further, as a dreamer, I said, in keeping with the spirit of briser les solitudes, to break the solitudes, shall you, Michael Jean, be the leader who offers Canadians the opportunity to adopt a new, truly representative title for their head of state? I dare hope that you shall indeed make the opening for the first Grand Chief of Canada, a nation of peace with history in harmony with its First Nations and at peace with humanity. Michael Jean did in her speech say that, she will devote a good portion of her time with the First Nations of Canada, trying to address some of the dire situations that they are facing during this period of time. Unfortunately, the time have passed, and as much as you can see a contrast between the coat of arms of Michael Jean and the coat of arms of John Hawkins, there has been very little in terms of change in behavior between the state, whether it is the Canadian state or the British Crown, which rules the Canadian state, or which owns, I don't know what word to use for this situation right now. But who is John Hawkins? John Hawkins was what they identify here as a successful English slave trader. This means a successful criminal, murderer, kidnapper, enslaver of human beings. Successful. And so, as you can verify in history books, John Hawkins was the business partner of Elizabeth I. That is the direct ancestor of King Charles III. And so this is old money. And when they say old money, that's where the money came from the kidnapping of men, women, and children in Africa, enslaving them. And so Elizabeth I and John Hawkins had a slave ship whose name was the Jesus of Lubeck. And so when our ancestors met Jesus, this is what they met: a slave ship, which kidnapped them from the west coast of Africa and took them to the Americas, and in the process enriched the royal family, not only of England, but of many other crowns in Europe, because, as you know, they intermarried. And so, as you would have had speeches by British monarchs in the past saying that they are colonizing Africa to bring civilization, to help, to aid. Well, in 2025, when you hear this so called land acknowledgement from Charles, all you're hearing is platitudes, as if he is doing a favor to address the First Nations people of Canada, bringing nothing in terms of true acknowledgement that repairs are in order. The First Nations people did not just sit and be victims. This quote here from Sitting Bull is something that we should teach all children in our world. I am a red man. If the Great Spirit had desired me to be a white man, He would have made me so in the first place. He put in your heart certain wishes and plans. In my heart, he put other and different desires. Each man is good in his sight. It is not necessary for eagles to be crows. We are poor, but we are free. No white man controls our footsteps. If we must die, we die defending our rights. And indeed, the genocide has not been complete. There are survivors of the Anishinaabe people, of the Arawak people, of the Maya, of the Aztec, uh, and of the Inuits all over the Great Turtle Island. This picture here of Sitting Bull with his family in 1881 in Randall, Dakota, reminds us that our brothers and sisters are not characters to be found in, books, but rather living individuals. And I will share with you some images of the chiefs who made the effort to state their position in front of Parliament Hill yesterday as King Charles was passing through. However, it's not just men, but also many women who have stood to speak their truth on this matter. In this regard, we salute Ashley Collingbull, who became the first Indigenous woman to be crowned um, Miss Universe. And typically, these pageant competitions are rather boring and shallow things, right? But this sister, when she was crowned in 2015, took the opportunity, used the platform to let the world know that her people are still there. We are still alive and we are fighting to gain what is ours on this earth. And so we applauded her. And I recall how a couple of years later, when there was a Haitian woman, Raquel Pellissier, who was in the running to become Miss Universe, um, we challenged her to follow in the footsteps of Ashley Collingbull, because at the time there was a foreign occupation of Haiti where the white supremacist forces led by the United States, Canada, and France invaded Haiti, overthrew the 7,000 elected officials there, and used the United Nations troops to placate the population, the masses, the black masses, so that they don't revolt and take over their country again. And as part of that repression, some of the soldiers that were brought in there with the United Nations contaminated the waterways of the Artibonite River with cholera, which caused 1 million Haitians to be contaminated and over 50,000, if not more, killed. And there were movements inside of Haiti by our now departed brother Mario Joseph and other attorneys who tried to sue the United Nations, the United States, Canada, who participated in this invasion, this illegal racist invasion of Haiti, and caused the contagion by cholera. Well, you can imagine what happened. The United States mobilized its money and its lawyers and said, no, you cannot sue the United Nations. And that was that. None of the families of these thousands of victims have received a cent in reparations from the criminals who sullied the water, who brought cholera to the country. I remind you that when our ancestors ruled in Kemet, ancient Egypt, it was one of the Mahat Confessions. In some list, it's number 34, When the deceased get in front of Osiris, the great black man, as part of the negative confessions, you're supposed to say, I have not sullied the water. Because it was always understood that the water is a common good, and anybody who sullies the water has committed a crime, which is what the United Nations troops did in Haiti, causing thousands of people to die. Unfortunately, Pellissier did not listen to me. She just waved and was pretty, and that was that. That's what was demanded of her, and that's what she delivered. However, this wasn't the case for Hannah Wahiti Maipi Clark, who entered the parliament in New Zealand last year and ripped the bill that was being presented, and because that bill was going to further erode the rights of the Maori people, the original people of New Zealand, whose land was stolen, just like the people of Australia's land was stolen, Canada, United States, everywhere in Latin America as well. And so there are sons and daughters of the survivors of white terrorism, the Mahafa, who choose when they get inside of the big house to remember who they are and to stand for their people. And we saw great solidarity when the singer, Julie Black, took it upon herself to make a slight but very important modification of the Canadian national anthem during this basketball game, this NBA game. I believe it was a couple of years ago. In the article, the journalist says there was the moment in the performance when the camera is kind of moving across you as you give that line and you change it to our home on native land. There's really striking shot because you look sort of directly at the camera like this is what we are doing. This is a conversation we are going to have, Canada. Indeed. For those of you who don't live in Canada, I can tell you that I have lived more years of my life in Canada than in my native Haiti. And often when Canadians try to define who they are and what they are, they tend to say that they are better than the Americans. Because here they practice racism with a smile. So it's supposed to be better. And unfortunately, many people who um, suffer from systemic racism accept that proposal as if racism with a smile is better, and as if this is all we could aspire to. But there are people who keep challenging the status quo. And so I applaud Julie Black for clarifying that this is not our home and native land. Not when you are not Anishinaabe, you are not Algonquin, you are not Mohawk. This is not your home and native land. Yes, it can be your home, my home, our home, but it is our home on native land. The native people are here. And what is important for us to realize, they are here and they are not thriving, they are suffering. Yes, let us take a look at some of the data. This report came 2 years ago. Human Rights Watch. And there are many other reports, and you can go back to several years and you will find it is the same stats, the same observations over and over and over again. Just a couple of quotes. Inadequate access to clean, safe drinking water continues to pose a major public health concern in many indigenous communities and impede efforts to advance indigenous rights in Canada, one of the world's most water rich countries. That's the important thing to note here. It's not a question of water being scarce. No, there is plenty of water for everyone. But there are specific communities who are deprived of access to this drinking water. As of September 2023, 28 First Nations communities across Canada remain subject to long-term water advisories, which alert communities when their water is not safe to drink. In July, Canada signed a $14 billion final settlement agreement to compensate First Nations children and families unnecessarily taken into government care due to its failure to provide funding for child and family services in Indigenous communities. Now, if you look into the reports, you will find not only those issues of access to drinking water, improper housing, uh, suicide rates through the roof, and people being incarcerated in huge numbers. These stats have not changed in decades, whether it is for the Black community, where we represent merely 3% of the Canadian population and 10% of the people in federal jails are Black. And the other large community, which is even bigger, is the Indigenous First Nations communities. Why is that? Millions and millions of dollars have been announced in budgets saying that we're going to help fix this, that. Never any systemic or substantial change in those stats. Only speeches, which change absolutely nothing. Now, you'd say, well, what does this have to do with religion, faith, and all of that? Well, we do not have the time to delve into it in detail here, but I encourage you to read upon the residential school process, whereby just like the missionaries who accompanied the militaries and the merchants, the three M's of the colonial enterprise, had done in the rest of the Americas, such as the Caribbean or my native Haiti. That's also what they did here in Turtle Island. The missionaries' job is to take over the native people's brain and make them accept their subjugation by the colonial militaries and merchants who have taken over their properties. And so, one of the things they did in Canada, as they did in Australia, is take the children from their families. They disrupted the Anishinaabe, the Mohawk, the Algonquin families. And the project, as is written in the Indian Act and all kinds of other documents, which prove that the goal was genocide, they wanted to take the Indian out of the child and turn them into something else. And this is what Sitting Bull was telling you there, that, you know, there is no reason for eagles to become hawks or crows. They are different. And so let the people be who they are. And so when you hear those speeches, whether it is from Charles III and others, speak as if, it was a happy encounter, like the First Nations people welcome. No, they did not welcome anybody. You murdered them. You slaughtered them. And some of them survived, some of them fought back. But let's face the reality, because they are carrying wounds and we have things to fix. So let's not try to sugarcoat this thing like the Americans have invented some kind of fantasy story about Thanksgiving and that the natives fed them, gave them. No, you slaughtered them. Face the reality. A few references. My article, when I proposed that a healed Canada would do away with the British Crown connection, and why not have as our head of state a Grand Chief? That would signal that Canada is truly independent. It would also signal truth and true reconciliation with the First Nations people. I will now share with you a few words that were heard during the trip or the passage of Charles III in Ottawa yesterday. Let us first hear this comrade who was one of the demonstrators. And like I said, if you're watching mainstream TV, Radio-Canada, CBC, you would think that everybody was clapping and applauding Charles III. But in reality, there were demonstrators and they were quite visible, except that they refused to show them on TV or on radio. They didn't interview them, but we noticed them and it is documented. Let us hear one of those demonstrators.
Je pense aux Jamaïcains, par exemple, puis à d'autres nations comme ça. La monarchie, c'est vraiment... ça a comme une emprise sur des pays du tiers-monde. Ouais. Puis des peuples qui sont pauvres. Ouais. Je vois pas pourquoi un homme riche va dans des pays pauvres en tant qu'un roi. Yeah.
He's saying that he doesn't understand why, a rich man goes into the impoverished countries. He mentioned Jamaica and others, and present himself as king. He considers this to be an aberration, and you can see what's written on his poster there.
Il est traité comme un roi pendant que des gens meurent de faim.
Mais on prétend que même la couronne qu'il porte aujourd'hui encore comprend des diamants qui ont été volés en Afrique et en Inde. En 2025, c'est terrible qu'il n'y ait pas un grand mouvement pour le retour de ces biens qui ont été spoliés.
So here I raise the issue that many of the diamonds in the very crown, the British crown, are reportedly stolen from Africa and India. And, why isn't there more of a outcry in the world to ensure that this long overdue return happens? And as I was saying that, the king was making his way in front of us. Let's watch.
De ces populations.
Effectivement, je pense que, évidemment, tous les diamants du monde ont été volés à un peuple ou à un Abolish monarchy! Abolish monarchy! Abolish monarchy!
Return the diamonds to Africa! Return the diamonds to India! You thieves! Return the diamonds to Africa! The African people need their diamonds! Thieves! Return the diamonds to the children of Kathmandu in India! Thieves! Volés! They stole my people from Africa!
So anyways, as you can see, it was loud and clear, but some folks will pretend to not have heard. And, this truth has been spoken for decades, centuries even. But the hypocrites pretend not to understand. And just like Charles said in his speech, after 20 trips to Canada, he's still trying to understand the situation. And so, to help understand the situation, let us now listen to some of the First Nations chiefs. For those who are not familiar in Canada, there are many communities where the leadership is still led by chiefs that are named by the people, and some of them are young, some of them are older. However, it is important to realize that our brothers and sisters are here. They have not vanished. They have many difficulties to lead, prosperous and happy lives because of the lack of empathy on the part of many of us, including those of us who are immigrants to this land. But justice delayed is something that we can still work to fix. Let us now listen to a couple of the chiefs, actually, one of the chiefs with whom we spoke. This is on Parliament Hill.
Do you have a special message for the king?
Yes, start to respect and implement the treaties. Not just give us lip service like he's done for the last. I'm from Treaty 8, so the last 126 years. Look at the disrespect we're getting today. We're standing outside as the original people while they're in there delivering the throne of the speech to the throne. So that tells us that there's still a lot of work to be done. Not only by Alberta, Canada, and the Crown, that they need to implement and honor and respect the treaties.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
How do you consider the response of fellow Canadians
From what we've seen here today, as you can see, more people were taking pictures of us than there were of the king.
Yeah.
More people from around the world came here to see and take pictures with the chiefs of the first peoples of this land. They told us what we're doing, what needs to be done for all of Canada. Thank you.
Reparations to the First Nations people of the Americas, of Africa. Return the diamonds to Africa. Return the diamonds to India. The people of Africa need their diamond. Let this family finally find work. Let them work. Let them stop living off the backs of impoverished peoples of the world. Why can they not work? Why can't they work? 500 years of exploitation. That's not enough. Why can't they work? They stole millions of my people from Africa. 55,000 British soldiers died in Haiti because they were making Africans slaves. It never dawned on these stupid people that they could do the work themselves. Reparations is what is required, not lip service, not speeches. Reparations. Let them work.
Indeed, we call on the family at Buckingham Palace to work. And this is not only for the old folks like Charles, but the young folks as well, like Harry, and his wife, Merkel, Angela Merkel, I believe is her name. Like, you guys are young. You should be able to understand this situation here. You cannot continue the practice of your elders and your ancestors. What is wrong with work? The African people worked for a few centuries carrying you on their backs, breastfeeding you. It's time to work. And so this is what I had to share with you, brothers and sisters. There are about 10 minutes left. So if you want to share your own perspective, do not hesitate to do so by dialing this number 613-482-2549. And I will be more than happy to hear what you have to share with us. Indeed, we say that we need to move to a higher level of brotherhood on this planet, one of which the great Sitting Bull would be proud today. This is why we have introduced the idea of remembrer. And we say that part of the reparations that need to happen, the Church of England, the Catholic Church, other Protestant churches that participated in the kidnapping of Africans and in the enslavement of the First Nations people of the Americas, as well as those of Africa, they need to return the keys of all these properties to the native peoples, so that when you enter a former cathedral or church, instead of seeing statues and pictures of imaginary white Jesus, white Mary, whatever, all of these imaginary white men and women of the Bible, children and adults will see pictures of Sitting Bull and his family, pictures of Tupac Amaru, statues of Jean-Jacques Dessalines, of Winnie Madikileza Mandela, of Miriam Makeba, of Kwame Ture, of Robert Sobukwe, of Casilda, all of these real men and women who rose against the barbarians, the enslavers, and fought for us to have a better tomorrow, a better life. This is not revolutionary. This is just like we are late. We should have done that yesterday. And so we say the struggle is against the militaries, those who are funding wars all over the planet, and wars in which their own children are not fighting, but they're taking the children of the impoverished people of the world and making them fight for the enriched elites. This has to stop. The merchants who are stealing the lithium of Bolivia, the uranium of Niger, of Burkina Faso, of Mali, they need to stop. You want to do business, you're going to do clean business. You're going to negotiate with the owners of the uranium, the owners of the lithium, and pay fair price for the gold of Africa. Just like you have your own petroleum in your country, no one is coming here to steal it from you. At least no one from India, no one from Africa. So let them have their resources. If you cannot help, at least do no harm. And so those merchants, the second M, need to be controlled. And the third M, the missionaries, okay, it makes no sense in 2025 for people to be peddling white Jesus to the native peoples who have survived the thing. Any more than it makes sense for folks to go around, proposing that Spider-Man is their god or Batman or Tarzan saves. No. The people have their own heroes from their own cultures. Let them celebrate their own ancestors. And let these missionaries find real work. productive work. Why not? Just like we're asking for the British royal family to do productive work as opposed to sitting their ass and then letting the people of Jamaica, the Barbados, and the so-called Commonwealth. There's nothing common about the wealth. You stole the whole thing. The people of Zimbabwe are still suffering. There are all kinds of treaties that were signed, and you never accepted to respect your word. You stole all of the land, and the people of Zimbabwe are still facing those problems. In South Africa, same thing. Your word is worth nothing. And so, land acknowledgement crap, keep that for yourself, king. Brothers and sisters, you let me do the whole show by myself. Well, I take it as it is. Our sister Chantal Timothée says, like the man said, if we must die, we will die standing and defending our rights and what is our own. Indeed, that was Sitting Bull, and he is alive today. As you know, we had First Nations chiefs such as Kassi Katwe, who was kidnapped in Haiti and burnt alive on the island of Cuba by the Spaniards. And he also said, do not baptize me. I don't need to go to heaven with these fools. I'd rather go to hell because if these people go to heaven, I don't want to go there. And I have stated it again and again. You have criminals like this American guy who participated in the assassinations of so many of our leaders, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, um, even Marcus Garvey. He participated in his capture and everything, in his demise. Well, imagine that this fool would now be in heaven, right? Um, the name I escapes me right now, but whether it is Jesse Helms, the former U.S. senator, and all of these Ku Klux Klan folks, if they are in heaven, what business do I have going into such a heaven? And what guarantee do I have that it is not these same fools who are going to be ruling in that heaven? No, that's all right. Thanks, but no thanks for your thing. Marie-Nadine Pierre says, making visits to the Commonwealth and appearances at other celebrations and high-profile events is what they consider work. Oh, yeah, indeed. Harry and Meghan resigned and got fired from all of it. Yeah, that's work. Yeah. I guess they should and that's why now every now and again they're giving a few black people some of that work. Like they gave Michael Jean to go to Africa and lecture the Africans about the crimes that the Europeans had committed and ask the Africans to apologize for their crimes. Yeah, we understand their sense of humor. Yeah. Marina Jean-Pierre tells us that the residential schools also existed in the US and they continue today with the foster care system. Indeed, it's the same practice. It's not only in North America, it's the same thing that's used, recycled. They even tried it in South Africa when the Boers controlled the land, in Rhodesia. When Cecil Rhodes and fellow criminals took over Zimbabwe. And it was through fights that Zimbabwe was finally liberated, and Azania is still in the process of liberation. So there is no other way. It is struggle. Struggle. Nothing has ever been given to us. There is no gift. We need to fight for what is right. Thank you, brothers and sisters. And I think we should leave you with, yeah, I think this sound is useful to hear what the king was told as he was passing by.
Thieves!
Return the diamonds to the children of Kathmandu in India. Thieves! Volés! They stole my people from Africa.
Maybe they did, but you...
They stole millions of people. These are thieves. Thieves! Thieves are not kings. Thieves! Return the diamonds to Africa. Return the diamonds to India.